Take a big breath in. Here we go.
Hey, brother.
Hey, man, how you doing?
Good. Yourself?
Good. I'm so glad you're doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on, man.
So there was this moment. I mean, from the moment I met you, I was really fascinated and interested, and was really curious to get to know you better and get to know you more. And when I first met you at Kripalu, the tipping point moment was I saw you post something about a certain posture, a certain asana pose you were doing.
Yeah.
And the caption was something like, it took you 15 years.
Yeah.
And so to me, that highlighted something and totally changed, and correct me if I'm wrong about this in any form or fashion or any way, but the immediate vibe I got from you when I first met you at Kripalu
Uh-huh.
was the depth, the genuine
Mhm.
depth of your yoga practice, and not just the physical practice, but yoga with a capital Y, like how it permeates
Mhm.
all of life and
Mhm.
how it seemed to affect just your way of being in the world. And
Mhm.
so when I saw you post about this posture that took you 15 years to get there, it's like I would guess, and this is again, correct me if I get any of this wrong,
Mhm.
that the physical manifestation, because there's obviously this sometimes a misconception that yoga is just about physical flexibility,
Right.
but it's like the idea that 15-year commitment, daily practice creates this flexibility that's not just physical. It's a much deeper flexibility of the nervous system,
Mhm.
like this openness, but that
Mhm.
your consistent dedication in this practice opened up the possibility of this, which really was just a physical manifestation of a deeper process.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, that resonates. I mean, I know I felt that in a different form, in a more subtle form when I took your breath work workshop, and there was that sense of transformation through the subtle bodies, and you're kind of facilitating and guiding us into that. For me, I really love the marriage between the angas, the ashtanga, the eight limbs of yoga practice, asana being one of them, and just finding that marriage between the more subtle bodies, the breath, of course, the prana, but also just being able to withdraw from the physical self to really go deeper within the physical self, and leading to a state of meditation. So that specific posture you're probably referring to is actually a sequence, and it was the sequence that took me 15 years, because each of those postures took me a long time to get to, and then the combination of that into a singular organism, that part was what was deeply challenging about that specific one.
Sure. And
Yeah.
and again, like from the outside, visually, it's so impressive. Like it's an impressive physical feat.
Right.
But I think, and you know far more about this than I do. But I remember reading something one time where it was like yoga's not about uh again the physical flexibility. It's about building trust and safety in the nervous system, which
Mm,
allows the body to open up even more. And
mm,
that's what the or part of what the dedication and practice is all about. So anyways, I'm just saying, I do recognize that some people, talking about this on the more I guess top layer for a moment, I recognize that some people are just born more flexible, for instance.
right, right.
But something like that, and just the way you carry yourself and how you teach and how you communicate, is just so deeply centered and grounding, and you're such a grounding
Mm,
presence to be around. So I just think that's to me just what I wanted to reflect about you being such a wonderful teacher,
mm,
and just like living your practice is so that's
mm.
I would really love to dig into that and learn more about your
Yeah, yeah. I think. Thank you. So, I really appreciate your presencing the nervous system. It's actually something that I've been considering more, because I came across a osteopath. I'm sorry, no, a doctor of osteopathy, which is a chiropractor, recently, and she's someone who's been deep in her craft, in her field, for about 20 years. And about 5 years ago, she started experiencing crippling sensations in her body, where she suddenly, as someone in her 30s, found herself not able to walk anymore. She found herself not able to like get out of bed. It was a real major effort. Like she had this deep fatigue. She found herself very, very difficult to like lift a spoon. And every doctor she went to had, of course, when something is idiopathic, they might say it's fibromyalgia, Lyme, or whatever, and might have been all those things. And so she said that she did test Lyme positive and all these other things. And she went through the doxy, the antibiotics, all that. And she was still in the same situation. But it was only when she started doing work around the nervous system that it really helped to change things. And I say that because I was diagnosed with Lyme. I was felt Lyme positive about 3 months ago,
Mm.
after maybe neglecting the symptoms for a year. And yes, anyway, I mentioned that because a lot of what I've come to understand as a writer, specifically in the medium of fiction, is the potential to recreate your storyline through the narratives we carry. So oftentimes we have this notion of ourselves, and that notion is at the heart of what the classical yoga tradition interrogates, which is the who am I?
Mm.
And oftentimes you really, some of the gurus I follow in the tradition really support and facilitate the who am I through the who am I not. And so really getting into the who am I not, like, I am I someone who's fixed at being 19 or 20 or 25 or 30 or 35? Well, if I am, then I'm going to be disappointed because those periods will change. Am I fixed at having long hair? Well, as we know with what happened with Bob Marley and his bout with cancer, when he lost his hair, it was really difficult for him to be in front of any cameras because he was so devastated because there was such a deep attachment to his hair,
Mm.
and his identity and the way other people identified him with him. And for a long time in my life, I had long hair, growing up, and I've started losing my hair some years ago, and right now, I have I'm still losing my hair, but beyond like an image or aesthetic, it's just it just is an extension of something internal versus external. So if there is hair that's happening, it's more of an internal. But the attachment part is, I think, what then creates this relationship to these narratives as what becomes akin to our venous and arterial system, which is oxygenated blood, deoxygenated blood going through these closed pipe systems through the arteries and veins. Well, we almost engage with our notion of who we are through the neural system, the nervous system, as if it's a closed pipe system. But then, what's pretty beautiful about the nervous system is that there is plasticity, and that you can constantly be able to re-engage with how you're engaging with the world. And to me, the asana practice really supports, uh, interrogating notions of who am I, because it allows you to go into the liminal spaces of what seems impossible. So,
Mm.
for instance, a headstand is really difficult for a lot of people. It was for me. It took me a while to get into. And then going into a headstand that's not a tripod headstand, just from, your forearms, that was difficult. And then going into the variations of headstand with your hands in front, with your hands to the sides, all that, those are variations. But then going from that to jumping into a headstand, which was part of that sequence, that
Mm.
then that's like, wait a minute, how do I, how is this even possible? So I think part of it is embracing that maybe it's not possible, and maybe it is impossible given your current neural storyline, your narrative.
Mhm.
But then it can be possible if you're able to like re-engage with that narrative. So that's kind of what I think I love about what you were saying as well about, for you, it's been acting in the, that world of just theater acting with mindfulness. For me, it's been about the world of art, specifically like poetry, fiction,
Mhm.
creative nonfiction with the yoga and the yogic path.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I definitely am very excited to dive into how writing overlaps and dovetails into your yoga practice and your yoga teaching and the workshops that you guide. I know at Kripalu, and um, I'm really excited to dive into that because I find stories, right? Bottom line, stories. Stories can deepen our understanding of each other,
Right.
other, types of people, other cultures, all those things. And also, as you're referencing here too, help us a deeper understanding of ourselves and the stories we tell ourselves. And is this is this actually true? Or maybe this was true. Is it true anymore? And like how we explore all that.
Yeah.
Um, so can you, I'd be curious to know, you're from, you know what else is something that's funny too, that I think I've realized from Kripalu specifically is, I grew up in the suburbs in Connecticut, but I spent basically my whole adult life so far, thus far until recently, living in New York City.
Huh.
And what I noticed when I got to Kripalu, um, one of the many things I noticed about having sort of left New York City as my as my primary home as an adult, uh, I would be drawn to certain people that I met at Kripalu. I mean, I'm drawn to basically everybody that comes in those doors is pretty freaking amazing, which is so beautiful to say. And I'm so grateful to be part of that community.
Yeah.
But I noticed I was particularly drawn to certain people. And then usually, almost like 9 times out of 10, as we got to talking, they
Yeah.
were from or currently lived in New York City.
Oh, fascinating.
There's just something about it. And so were you born and raised in, like, can you tell me just a bit about how you came to your yoga, like just, just the bullet points of like upbringing, how you came to your practice, but New York
Yeah,
City was layered in there. And that was something
for
that was
sure.
funny to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, John. And I'm curious, where in New York City were you living?
So I bounced around a bit. I think starting in like 2008, I lived a little bit in Woodside, Queens. Then I
Oh,
lived
sure.
in, Bay Ridge,
Uh-huh.
Brooklyn. And then I lived 68th and First, so the
Okay.
lower end of the Upper East Side. And then the last 5 years, I lived in Inwood at the most northwest corner of Manhattan. Loved it
Right.
there. I mean, I loved every place I lived for different reasons, but I
Yeah.
loved being way up in the corner there. That was cool.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's amazing that each of the places you mentioned, none of although like the city is a very highly concentrated population, hospitals aren't necessarily easy to get by, and they're not necessarily right down the block. But each of the places you mentioned weren't too far from hospitals.
That's funny you say that. Yeah. I had an emergency appendectomy and luckily I could walk to the hospital like a half block. Because I really like it's weird. I could joke about it now, but in retrospect, I was like, wow, I almost like that could go real bad. And I hobbled my way from my apartment at 68th and First. I hobbled that like half block over to, props to New York Presbyterian, I think it's called.
Okay.
They were so amazing, but I got immediately put on IV and was just like, you
Oh,
are, yeah, like your appendix is just about to explode. I was like, oh my God. I
no.
knew
So
I
you
didn't
got
feel
an
good.
appendicitis? Like, did they have to remove your appendix?
Yeah, yeah, it was crazy. But yeah, so did you grow up in
Well,
Astoria, was
so
it?
yeah, I'm a product of Astoria, and
Mhm.
I feel a connection to Astoria in a way I don't know if I necessarily feel a connection to all of the city.
Yeah.
And so Astoria, my parents have been in the same apartment since the 1970s. They're still there. It's a rental. It's rent stabilized, not rent controlled. I believe rent control stopped in 1965.
Mm.
And just as an aside, I did have a friend, an elder, who passed away some years ago. But he lived in the area that was the cusp of Little Italy and what's Soho now, and he lived in a what was a duplex, and right now I think those rent at $15,000 a month.
Mm.
And when I remember I'd go by to his place, I'd walk him home sometimes, and he told me, Asif, he was old school Italian American. He's like, Asif, you know how much I'm paying for this apartment? I said, no, how much? He said, $65 a month.
What?
Yeah, and that's rent control for you, but that's probably why they stopped rent control.
Yeah, that's outrageous. I've never heard one that crazy. I've heard some crazy, amazing ones, but not that crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so people like him, I think just like with anywhere, it's just like the people in your life really shape who you are.
Yeah.
I remember he used to tell me, "Asif, you kids these days are, so violent. You carry weapons. When we were kids, we would put socks and we would put rocks in socks, and that was our weapon."
Oh my
Uh,
gosh. Yeah.
but yeah, I think a lot of it is just stories and like being able to carry a lot of different stories. How did the city shape me? I think part of what I really love about the expression, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. For me, I started adopting that as a spiritual conundrum because New York City can, because of the landscape, just like Los Angeles or other cities where people are trying to make it in something, it could lend itself to a level of narcissism that's inadvertent because it's really about branding yourself and like making it and being successful. And so as I got deeper in my path of yogi and, this path of Kabiraj, medicine man, within the tradition of my family, who are from India and Bangladesh. And so my grandfathers were traditional medicine men. I didn't know them, but I wanted to connect with that lineage. So I started going back and forth to India and to Bangladesh to study some over 20 years ago. So, when I got into that path, it was really a path of spirituality. So I really entered yoga from this place of spirituality. And so I was and as that merged with my path into Sufism, it really led me into going deeper into the state of what's often called nothingness or quietness, as Rumi calls it. So how can I go deeper in nothingness, like not being a presence, but being a presence through not being a presence? And so it was almost the inverse of that New York City culture of making it. So I think for me, then it became more of that, is that this would be the most ideal environment in the most unideal way, because I think some of the critiques me and maybe other people I've come across have about people who were often passed off as gurus or celebrity gurus, etc., is that they kind of had a lifestyle that wasn't very rooted in community or in hardship or in just challenging scenarios. Maybe not even in terms of a work environment. Like I'm curious about how some of these celebrity gurus would do if they were in the office with Michael,
Mhm.
and like what the interactions there would be. But yeah, so I think for me it was like really being steeped in the practice of meditation yoga in the heart of what some people might refer to as the beast.
Mm.
Uh,
Yes.
yeah.
Totally.
Does that resonate for you? Because I know you said you had a marriage between the world of acting and the world of mindfulness, and how did that play out for you?
Yeah, so well, one thing was when I mean the whole journey started, I was in college in Boston, then moved to New York City. And so I started meditating initially in Boston, and just a brief bullet point there was the meditation and acting as like a serious thing that I was trying to gonna start to try and make a living out of, both started around the time I was 18.
Oh wow.
And so I started having panic attacks around then, and then that's how meditation started, then breath work. And then also breath work lent itself to a lot of the training I was doing to be on stage and for my voice to carry without, blowing your voice out and doing 8 shows a week and all that stuff. And so the mindfulness always dovetailed and supported my career. Um, and then in New York City, what was so cool, and the point that kind of really lit me up there, in relating a piece that I could feel is being in the beast, so to speak, in the belly of the beast. Like, so I would go to this, a couple different Zen meditation centers. I would like touch in on, or even just when I was meditating in my apartment, and primarily it was Zen. And at that time, and a lot of times, talk about a good place to do sound meditation, just to like notice the sounds. Like New York City, you're in the belly of the beast. The sounds are so chaotic. And when I first was trying to learn and deepen my meditation practice, of course, every time a siren, every time a person screaming on the street like came in, I'd be like, God damn it. Like I would get so frustrated because I feel like it was quote unquote distracting me or this or that. And it was such a great way. It was like almost getting, in one sense, or at least in my own kind of way of framing it, at least, it was like getting thrown in the deep end to like deal with, like, why do I think I need to control what sounds I'm hearing or not hearing in this moment? Or why is this sound appropriate, but this sounds inappropriate for this moment? And so it taught me a lot just in that sort of like simplistic, conceptually simplistic way. And it also makes me think of, have you ever heard of Sri Chinmoy?
Yeah, of course. He had a ashram in Jamaica, Queens, New York. Yeah.
Yes. So I don't mean to speak out of turn. I had a couple friends that I made through the distance running community.
Uh-huh.
And so something really special that about Sri Chinmoy, and again, I don't know too much about it, but the two friends that I have from that community are, first of all, exceptional, exceptional distance runners.
Oh wow.
But it's not from a place of performance. It was that Sri Chinmoy, as far as I understand it, his whole thing. Oh, a couple of things I would mention, and then to tie this back to your experience, and a couple other things I want to ask about your experience with your family lineage too. Um, but Sri Chinmoy's thing was, people would be like, at that time, all these gurus were setting themselves up in these gorgeous places in Malibu and like all these beautiful places. And like, how could you not if you had the option? Of course, it's wonderful. But my understanding is that Sri Chinmoy was like, yes, that's beautiful, but I want to be like really deep in it. I want to be in the city, like in New York. I want to be just like on the block. One of the signature things of this three chinmoy community is this. There's this beautiful documentary about it too called 3100 Run and Become. And my friend directed and made that documentary, and it's about this 3,100-mile foot race that is around one single block in Queens, New York. The people running it, competing in it, it's every summer. They might be doing it right now,
You
actually.
said 3,100 miles?
3,100 miles around one city block in Queens. They just run in
Oh,
circles.
I see. I see. It's not, yeah, because I was like, that's New York to California is about that long, but yeah.
They run around the same city block in circles. And I think the finishers, the first finisher, I don't know if it's something from, again, please fact check me on this to get the details exactly right, but it's something like it takes 40 to 50 days of, so they set up like trailers so people rest, at nighttime they rest, but then it's like you get up the next day, you just keep going, and you get up the next day and you just keep going. And I spent some time there a few years ago. I spent some time there with them, and it's just
Where was it?
it's in Jamaica, I think. It's
It is.
this.
Okay, probably by the ashram then.
Yeah, there was a school. I remember there was a school and a playground, and it was like around this. I forgot the school and stuff. I could probably pull it up, but suffice it to say, all to your point about being in the belly of the beast, but like being just really in it, in like the day to day people, having, working in offices, working in restaurants, and dedicating themselves to, in this case, extreme endurance, but not for the sake of like, there's nothing to win. Like if you win the race, I don't know. I think they like, they like give you like a little thing that they make or something, just like symbolically. Like there's no prize money. There's no, as far as I know, there's no sponsorships. Like there's nothing in it, but people take like months out of their summer and really train all their life, all their year to just circle this city block for self transcendence, for spiritual.
Right.
Anyway,
How do you feel, John, that that plays out for you? Like that concept of difficulty, like embracing that level of like what seems impossible. Like, how does it play out for you currently? Like, how do you incorporate that now that you're not necessarily steeped in the beast?
I love that. I love because I keep wanting to get to things I want to add. I love these questions you're asking. Because I feel like I could talk to you forever. This is why I wanted to have you on. I really appreciate it, man. I don't know why. I like almost feel like emotion right now, like charging, in a really beautiful way. I'm very moved by your presence, and I appreciate this question. Right now, so around that time, I even met the people in that community because I was getting really into distance running, and I think part of all this and the question and feeling emotion around it is because I was going through a really hard time. And what I find interesting, and I think part of, I'm sure, where I'm feeling emotion and related to talking to you and getting to know you is, again, in my deep respect for your dedication to your practice, and especially that aspect of the deep dedication to physical practice, and not from a place of, look at me, I could literally put my leg over my head. Whoa, isn't that cool? Isn't that impressive? But like from the deep inner practice it takes to show up for that every day, to keep expanding and going deeper, is with the running. It was never about anything other than proving to myself that I didn't have to be stuck in an old story. Because at that time in my life, I guess I'll just be super candid right now. I had this running, I realized in the deep, deep background that kind of got revealed to me over sitting meditation stuff. I had this thing in the deep, deep background running at that time. It was like my early 30s.
Okay.
And it was like, you're a fucking loser. You're a fucking loser. Like it was like really, and it was just constant running in the background of my head. And I think it was for a couple years. And I could probably highlight the reasons in retrospect, like where that started and different things. But suffice it to say, when I got into the distance running, it was a way to just be with myself and just say, even when I get tired, even when it feels like, what am I doing? And blah, 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 I can just keep going. I can just keep going. I can even transcend, and not in like a bypassing way, but transcend anything that makes me, that makes me think you should stop or you should be faster. Like any voice that was coming in, it was like, just put one foot in front of the other. And somehow it helped me with that observer effect, like just objectively witness what was happening and just be like, I don't know. I feel like I'm jumping all over the place a little bit.
Well, I mean, I'm getting the outer body right now. Like I'm seeing you being what you're talking about with mindfulness, which is so much the aspiration for us in meditation is to really be able to be a witness to yourself. And is that what running has been for you? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it was just a way to be like who I think I am or what I think I know about myself, and just a way for almost like, if this makes sense, but I guess for lack of a better way to put it, a way to transcend ego, but not by proving I could do something, but by proving I don't even know who I am in a way, in like a
Mm,
beautiful way.
mm,
I don't
mm,
even know what my limitations are. Like, let
mm,
me just see what happens if I just keep taking another step.
right.
You know, and then I would find my place. Would find myself in places like almost literally because I would just run around the city for like a couple hours at a time, and not necessarily fast at all. Like I wouldn't wear a watch, I wouldn't time it or anything like that. I would just kind of like jog, meander around the city, and I would literally find myself in places being like, "Oh my gosh, I'm already on the Lower East Side. Like, how did that happen? When did that, or whatever." But so now, as it translates, is I started training jujitsu, and I had a pretty intense session yesterday with a coach, and it's a similar thing of just transcending self through being like, I'm just gonna keep going. And I don't know where this reserve is coming from, but it's not from a place of muscling it. It's not
Right.
from a place of proving anything. It's not from a place of winning. It's just from a
Yeah.
place of being like, I'm just gonna keep going
Right.
anyways and see where this takes me. So I don't know if that, but does
I love
anything
no,
else?
I mean, that ties to Sri Chinmoy because that's essentially what he would do is kind of
Mm.
question the narrative. And so he started weightlifting, I think in his 50s or 60s. So yeah, so it's just like going from this very classical path of the yoga, and it might look a certain way, but maybe I think what he presenced, and I think you're presencing is maybe it doesn't have to look any specific way. And really the way it looks is really getting back into what you're saying about the nervous system and the narrative and this attachment to the narrative.
Yeah.
We're
It's
expecting, yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say it was funny because, for instance, around that time I ran the New York City Marathon in 2017,
Yeah.
and I'm not a marathon runner. I didn't run it fast. But what's funny is when you commit to yourself to something, sometimes there are outer things that maybe sound impressive or look impressive. Although my running time was not particularly impressive, just the idea that I ran a marathon to some people that's like, "Whoa, you ran a marathon," but I don't really say that much because I'm just like, well, I guess I did, but it doesn't feel like an accomplishment. You know what I mean? Or like anything that I own, it just felt like I showed up and I just didn't stop. And
Huh.
that helped me change a narrative. And I guess to tie this piece together, to just finish this out on my side, it was just something I found myself saying throughout that marathon. And again, like just being raw here was, see, you're not a fucking loser. You're not a fucking loser.
Wow.
You are not a fucking loser. And I just kept one foot in front of the other. And it was just about transcending a story that was not helping me, because in that story of saying, I'm a fucking loser, I was making myself small, so I was getting to the point where I felt like I wasn't contributing to society because I was too afraid to or something, and I'm like, if I'm on this planet, I should be doing something that contributes to the greater good, and yet
Wow.
I feel like a shell of myself, and I'm so small and whatever, and so that's how I feel like it helped me, and I guess in quotes, transcend the narrative I had about myself, but not from a place of trying to be a better person for me, but from a place of being like, if I'm on this planet, I should try to contribute something useful.
That's amazing. I mean, it makes me wonder about, and, maybe I don't know if this is space for it, but just that term loser. It just feels like so weighty. Like there's just so much gravity there. And like there's just you're saying it right now, and we're in this moment in, early August in 2026. And yet there's an echo to like decades ago that I'm hearing, and there's this reverberation. And so it just makes me wonder, like, wow, like, how did you unpack that? Was that enough? Did the running do it? Or do you feel like you have to keep running? Because part of what you shared with the whole running piece is that there was that, there was that narrative of you're a loser in your head, and it was running. You used the term running. You said it was running through my head, and you outran it. You were so then does that mean that you always have to run up against it, or did you outrun it where it's no longer there?
I think I think it became a thing where it doesn't matter. Like like almost like even to say whether and actually this is a shout out. I'll give the specific shout out to my friend Jen Lyon.
Okay.
She's an incredible actor. She's really funny. She's a super funny comedian. And I did a play with her called Fish in the Dark, which Larry David, from Curb Your Enthusiasm and from Seinfeld, he wrote this play that we all did together. And Jen Lyon, I remember, said to me one time, this is probably 2015, she said to me, this, because this was all around a similar time, she said to me that her, as somebody, whatever, like long story short, she just said that to be positively obsessed with yourself or negatively obsessed with yourself, either way you're obsessed with yourself, right? So like sometimes people are like, they'll mention some grandiose figure that seems like they love themselves so much, and it's like, that's obnoxious, like this person's a pain in the butt. We can look at certain figures in our world where you see that and you're just like, God, give us a break. You're so obsessed with yourself, right? But then the thing is, if we are a person on the other end that's negatively obsessed with ourselves, do we assume that that's somehow better? Is that more noble because we're just constantly beating up on ourselves? So that means we're not narcissistic. It's like, it's kind of a negative narcissism, sort of.
Wow.
And so whatever context that came up in with this conversation with Jen, again, shout out to her. I was like, it was around that time and at that moment. So I think that what the running helped me do was just get past the whole idea of just being so concerned with myself, and then switch to the lens to be on like, why does this even matter? Just go do something for society as best as you can. Go contribute something. And I think that's probably when like the idea of maybe even guiding breath work or getting into the yoga space or like holding these spaces sort of came in, because I was like, how can I mean, storytelling for sure, acting, all these things. But continuing just being like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to try to contribute as best I can. And that's how the voice, it's not like I don't know if I got past it, or I wouldn't know how to phrase it, but if that makes sense, that's kind of where the big shift came in. And that was all the time of the running and everything else. It's like, who cares what I think about myself? Just go do something for other people. And like,
Right, right,
like,
right.
get it
Yeah, I love
together.
that, Sean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, shout out, her name is Jen, you said?
Yeah. Jen Lyon. Yeah.
Yeah, well, shout out to Jen Lyon for conveying that to you, and then you conveying that to me. Like, I've never thought about that level, that notion of negative narcissism. I have thought about how people can be like very consumed in their own issues to a point where the woe is me just is it engulfs everything. It
Mm.
engulfs, we're probably around people who they don't know how to not be in their woe, and so any conversation, any interaction usually in that. So I could see how, I wouldn't have thought about that term negative narcissism. I would just think about narcissism, but I think that's really useful to think about it that way.
Yeah, and it might be kind of harsh and that's not necessarily going to resonate with everybody or whatever, but for me, it was a paradigm shifting thing. It was just like, oh, bottom line is I'm thinking about myself when I put the focus on, instead of like, I don't know, around that time too, I was thinking about the difference between living life from what can I get versus living life
Mm,
from what do I have to offer.
wow.
And living life from what do I have to offer that's an abundant way to live, like not necessarily literally from money, but an
Right.
abundant way to live, just that you're contributing to the tribe, you're contributing
That's
to your community. And
right.
that's what we should all be doing in our own way.
That's
Everybody
right.
contributes something different, but if you're living from that place, that feels much better, you
I
know?
mean, in many ways, that's one of the primary jewels that Krishna teaches Arjuna in the Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita,
Mm.
is, while Bhakti yoga, which is the yoga of devotion, and other forms of yoga are very useful. If there was one yoga that I would emphasize, it would be karma yoga, which is selfless service. And that's essentially what, what you're presencing.
Beautiful. Yeah. So to bring this back to New York, to your parents, and then you mentioned your great grandfathers too.
My grandfather, my great grandfather,
Yeah.
going down the line, yeah.
Yeah. So when did the yoga and the spiritual practice, you mentioned Sufism, which I love. This is so amazing. And so when did these practices, they sound like they're layered and you're deep in your DNA.
Mhm.
When did they start to manifest for you in your trajectory personally?
Yeah, what a great question. Yeah, I think part of it is I feel like in some ways we're all lineage holders because we all have the ACTG codon of genetic makeup that's 97.1% similar to a banana. Yes. So,
Uh,
we're not that different from a banana, and if you do think of it in that context, it's like that also just takes out that, just that gravity or that sense of, like, "Look at me," or this, that celebrity nature of anything. I think even, like, that idea of being a lineage holder can lend itself to that.
hmm,
Uh and I think New York's a great place to have all of those things be like, just fully shattered, because, there's so many stories that you're constantly interacting with, so many lives and so many contexts, and there's the stories of the people that raised them, and the clothing lines that hang from fire escape to fire escape, to the people who climb fire escapes when you're not home to see if they can maybe grab your TV for your radio, or the guys who are standing in front of the pizzeria with their bats, and they got your back because 'cause you're from that block, but, if you're not from there, then there might be some trouble. So, just kinda like that, what a how radical of a shift would that be from, like, growing up within an ashram environment or in a polite environment or an environment where you're constantly steeped in the philosophy of enlightenment, but then you don't experience someone being beaten to a pulp with a bat in front of you, or, you don't experience, like, someone asking you for 25 cents, and they really mean, like, anything you have in your pocket.
mhm,
Taking your wallet and running with it.
mm,
And, just the constants of, like, being shaped by, as an adult, this notion of having a provincialism because that's somehow you graduated into this tough. And I think, as men, I'm a heterosexual male, and just I think that there could be a toxicity around the toughness that a place like the city can breed as well. And so just kind of being able to again get into more of, what is any of this, because none of this makes sense. And I think for me, that's kind of been the running line, is none of this makes sense. None of this is real.
mm,
And, life's too short for a career. So what's my purpose? And I think purpose has kind of been central. And maybe it was because my dad's a writer, and I was always around books. And so, I had an opportunity to, like, really just, while other kids who might have grown up similar to me, in, more of a in the economic margins, didn't have a dad who was a writer and wasn't surrounded by books. I had at least that privilege of being around books, so I could just kinda, like, escape into the realities of the kids who were locked away in an attic, Flowers in the Attic.
mm,
It's a series of oftentimes associated with romance novels and sometimes maybe trashy romance, but I was reading when I was when I wasn't going to school, I was reading these kind of, like, books and stuff, so I spent a lot of time just, like, tuned out of school and at the education system. It didn't make sense to me. So I was just, I'd made friends in front of the school, and then we just, like, hop on the train and just have adventures.
mm,
And somehow, I think because of the way a lot of the education system works is that there's this phenomena in education called just, promotion, and so there's a need to promote because you have a certain population of people who need to move on to the next grade,
mhm,
'cause you need to air out the school, so, you can only really hold so many people back, so if you're just barely making it, you could still be, promoted, and I
yeah,
think I'm probably an example of that because I was, again, like, barely going to school when I was there. I was, barely checked in.
mm,
And it wasn't because I was cool. I wasn't, like, cool and not going to school. It was just, like, it just felt terrifying to go to school.
interesting.
Yeah. So I think that kinda is what led me to, like, get my real education, which was, like, reading outside of school, hanging out with, kids who were doing art in a very more practical way. I went to art high school, just to be transparent, so I did have the privilege of going to a specialized school, which was, a school that was dedicated to the art. Of my, 7 periods a day, 4 of them were film,
Mm,
because I had, made sure by the time I was a junior. Some people it was illustration, so for some people it was photography. For me, it was film, and, so I was really always into the arts. I love drawing, all those things, so I think the arts had a major part to do with it, and I think, being able to, tap into myself through the arts because it's such a window to the soul, as the cliche saying goes. So I think being able to see and be around giants, like people who were these kids who had amazing talent with drawing and painting that they would do on the side of of a store or of a train illegally, but their art was practical art. It was maybe sending a message as well, and there was communication happening with other people. So there was like almost a language system that was being built. So being able to witness that the way people might have creatively played with clothing and like, I got into thrifting pretty young. So I was in high school when I got into thrifting, part of it for economic reasons, part of it because, I was like, oh, I don't have to spend uh, $50 on a pair on a shirt. I could spend $50 on a wardrobe. You know?
Yeah.
Uh, so I think for me, it was that alternative culture that things don't have to be the way that they're written on, including education. Education maybe doesn't have to look like kindergarten through 12th grade. You get a diploma and you can't really show anything for it, but you could spend years not going to school and having read all these books and like knowing art in a practical way and so on.
Yeah.
So I think that's what really spoke to me pretty early on. And I think, my dad and, my parents always exposing us, but not really forcing us into anything. So I was around the books, I was around the spiritual tradition and practices. I was around the medicine in a very practical way, again, beyond the Brahmanism of it, beyond like, hey, I'm somebody and you should come to me, but more like, hey, you just, have a huge gash over your eye and we don't have insurance. So let's see what we can do with our medicine, our herbs and our spices. And so just really being able to have the fortune of being on the margins to be able to tap into that culture of ancient wisdom in a very humble way. And I think that's always what's kept me humble. It makes me think of what you were saying about running around the block and that feeling of like, wow, I ran 3,100 miles. Jay-Z has a line where he says, I'm on the block like I'm 8 feet tall. The streets embrace me, dog. But you hear that from people who try to really be rooted in that culture of being embraced, but also what you were saying, you're a loser. And so Max B, who was part of this Harlem crew called the Dipset, he has a line where he says, uh, I hug the block, but the block don't love me. I love the block, but the block don't love me. And it keeps going back to how the block doesn't love him. And maybe it's the block that's calling him loser. But I think over time, you start having an appreciation for the people you thought were the bullies. And maybe they went through stuff. Like I didn't know what was going on in Peter's house or Frank's house and so on. Like maybe they were being beat up and, things that you start finding out when you're older and you have like instead of like having this grudge about they were bullies to you, it's like maybe just having more empathy. And I think that's kind of what ultimately led me into uh, what I would say is a healthy level to drugs and alcohol. And what I mean by that is, I have friends who've passed away through heroin, through suicide, that kind of thing. And, and not just, I lived in upstate New York for a while. And, and I think when I say this, like across the board, like in terms of race, ethnicity, like, I've seen how impacted people have been by the not making sense world. And because it doesn't make sense, I think a lot of people are seeking God. And I think that what I've noticed is that people I know who've been on these hard substances, they're just really trying to connect because it's connecting to them to something. Whether it's like hitting the bottle hard or whether it's doing some, meth or heroin or cocaine or crack. And none of those things I think are good or things that anyone should do. But part of me gets it. I get why people do it because again, like we're constantly engaging in a world that is crushing our spirit oftentimes. So I think I've always had that sense of empathy for people who are, in the margins, downtrodden. And so for me, though, it led to fasting. So I started fasting pretty regularly. Outside of any tradition, I would do water fasts. And
Does that start early? Like, did that
yeah,
start
when I
young?
was in my Saturn return to around 27, I
Yeah.
started doing this thing where, I mean, I was fasting in my family tradition, but that was more like, just like going through the ritual of the fasting and like connecting with something, and there was something spiritual. But this was more like, I'm just not going to eat for 7 days, and so see what happens. And so, and again, there was this. I wasn't part of a community where we were doing this together. I was in with a girlfriend at the time. She just broke up with me. So, if anything, I was just devastated. I just lost my job at the time, and so I just decided, like, this seems the right thing to do. That was the inner voice that was saying that. So that's kind of what started really leading to the path for me, is just it all kind of culminated into that one fast, I would say.
Interesting. And
Fast started then shifting everything for me. But, and I mentioned all the other stories because I think they're important, because I carry those stories with me. And I feel like it's a big part of my medicine in terms of being able to just hold, empathy and stay in a state of oneness, through nothingness, staying in a state of oneness. And again, it could be someone who was making, and you see this in New York, this, John, people who were making $200,000 last year being on the streets this year.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you might have even known them. And it's like, wait a minute, is that John on the subway with, I know that guy. He was making bank in Wall Street, and now he's on this, so I think part of it is just knowing that, it's all of our stories can change for the better or worse.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in there that I would love to draw on. One of the things that stands out is you mentioned the word practical a couple times, and one of them was around the art that your friends were doing that was like technically illegal, but was really like expressing something, and like there's a practicality around the art. And then the the idea that, again, even how we started with Sri Chinmoy, which is so cool that you know him. And again, because what I know, I wish I knew even more, but like just what I know from as an observer was so special, was this idea of almost like, I guess you could really say, practicality around the spiritualism, and not like a loftiness like, oh, spirituality is over here, only in the beautiful places, only by the ocean where it meets the gorgeous cliffs. It's like, no, like finding spirituality in connecting to the block, to this singular block that I'm going to keep going around, to, even as you mentioned, the bullies, and like, so it's really remarkable. Someone else comes to mind who I guess I will not name because I'm not sure what I'm going to say about it at the moment, but I'm going to let it come out. But it's a person who actually was also in that I met also through that Larry David play. And this person had a really hard upbringing in New York, and then rose to a level of prominence in the entertainment industry. And they I just was endlessly fascinated by them, um, because they took something that could have crushed or led to addiction, like all these downward spirals, and yet they took all this pressure from their life growing up, really difficult, in a really difficult way in New York City. They took all this pressure, and it was almost like, I'm thinking of that kind of saying, "Pressure makes diamonds."
Mm,
Um, they took all this pressure and they spun it into this incredible, not only like career in terms of, oh, that's a really talented person in the entertainment industry, but career in terms of activism, supporting their community, all these things. And this, I always thought how interesting it is that there's always this, seems to be this fork or this crossroads. Do I choose fear or do I choose love? Do I choose fear? Or do I choose love? And that's, so the idea that all of the difficult and different things about living in the city, for instance, or different things that you mentioned, I just think about how remarkable that you went to this spiritual path, and then to come full circle that you mentioned going through a rough time, and this led you to a fast, right? Like this kind of literal cleansing. And then how this is part of the spiritual path when it could have gone to drugs, for instance, or different choices. And oh, one other thing I want to say, and then I want to bring it back to the fast, is you mentioned around people how it's obviously not good and in no way condoning like drugs and these different
that's
things, because but when you can frame it, what is the why? Like, what's really underneath this? In like, how, if there's a lack of whatever you want to call it, spirituality, God, or like a connection to something greater. I have people who are very close, many people who are very close to me that are in AA, for instance. And
Mm.
I have had some of the most impactful, profound conversations with them around like I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't know much about AA other than what I know from the people I love so much who are in it and are in recovery and everything.
Mm.
And the idea that there's all this idea about transcending ego by any number of things, but like getting out of your own small story,
That's
like
right, the 12-step program, right?
yeah, all of that. And so if we could have an understanding, I guess this is a side note, but like if we could have an understanding about that, about more compassion around addiction, because it seems to be for a lot of people a seeking for something greater, but it's just a very negative, destructive way to get there. So, anyways, that you
What
mentioned that.
that's for you, I mean, I know, you know, you mentioned this in relation to, like, close friends. I'm just wondering, just I would imagine there's a lot of pressure in the entertainment industry. So
Mm.
I'm just wondering, is that a byproduct of the entertainment industry? Is it something that you yourself had to face in terms of, like, just being around it, just being, like, feeling that level of pressure where of, like, uh, things that you had to fulfill as an entertainer that led you to, like, maybe being like, "Okay, I need to have some of this."
The pressure, I mean, part of it is for a long time, I was actually when I was younger, I guess I'll just say this much. When I was younger, I was really concerned that I would be a loser, right? So here it
Mm,
comes back to this.
mm,
I was really concerned because I felt like I didn't have a passion for anything. And I was like, I don't know, like as high school started to wear on, I was like, I don't even I don't know what I would do for a job. Like I don't know what I'm willing to show up for every day for 8
mm,
hours or whatever a day. And so
mm,
I was like, even though I was so lucky to have a good public school education, but like a good education, I'm lucky in a lot of ways for all these things. I was really concerned. I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do. And then again, long story short, when I discovered acting, I was so obsessed with it that I was like, okay, that's it. And it was just tunnel vision because it was like, be great at this or literally be a piece of shit on the street,
oh,
right? And so it was a motor, right? Let's call it that. And
wow.
so the pressure was really internally driven, but then it becomes external when you become an adult and I have to like pay my bills and all these things. And like the jobs are like up and down and like these different things. And that's where meditation kept me level,
Mm,
or helped, even though at times, I'm human, I would get susceptible to being like, oh, I didn't get this job or that job. And I'd be like, oh, and then the stories start. But that's why, always coming back to the meditation practice and then the breath work was a way to get me out of myself and keep, again, as I approach my 30s and really hit a down point, be like, how do I make my life more than just me?
mm,
And I'm sure
mm.
having kids helps some people with that. And I know you have a daughter, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So I'd love to get into that too. Um, but yeah, so the pressure has all come into it for a lot of different reasons. And then actually the last thing I'll say about it too, just all to this point is something I realized as my career started to get like it, I guess you could say advance in quotes.
Mm,
I started to work with people who people would know. And some of those people were perfectly happy and well adjusted, love their careers, love their life in any sort of, functional contentment way. Of course, like nothing's perfect for anybody, like perfect, but they seem really well adjusted. And then I met other people who were super famous, super successful that
yeah,
were miserable. And it was the typical thing. But what it helped me realize from a first hand point of view was, oh, the problems never change. If
yeah,
anything, they almost get amplified. It's like, okay, yeah, I need to get this job because it's like I need to make sure I pay my rent. But for them, it's like, well, they've got kids in this school and they've got a mortgage or whatever, just because like
right,
life keeps accumulating.
right.
And I'm not even talking about making bad decisions about, oh, they invested too much money here or did too much. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just saying like, yeah, their life progressed. They have a family, have kids, and they have to pay for things. So just because I'm worried about my $2,000 rent, they're worried about, paying for their family for something. It's the same problem. It is at a different level for different reasons, but they are
Mm,
also suffering the same problems. Now, it used to be like, oh, I can't get seen for this project because I'm not famous enough. But now they
mm.
are famous enough, but they're too famous, so they can't get seen for that project because they don't want someone that's known from this or that TV show, or like, oh no, you're known for this, so we won't see you for this, or like now you're too old for this. And I'm like, what? So anyways, it's like the problems never changed, even though they
No.
got famous and successful. So like that didn't. So anyways, just to tie that
Yeah.
together.
Well, I mean, you're making me think of Robin Williams, and his name is slipping my head in right at the moment, but the famous he did a lot of traveling around foods, and
Anthony Bourdain.
Anthony Bourdain. It's
Yeah.
just like, wow, they hit their pinnacle, and what happened to them? Yeah.
It's tough. Yeah, there's a lot. And I wouldn't again, I don't claim to know anything if I don't know someone
Yeah.
personally. And even
Yeah.
when I do know people personally, I don't claim to really know
Right.
anything.
That's right.
Um, but yeah, just, it's there is definitely a false sense of just because someone's name is known that things are, you know, uh all clicked or are in coherence.
That's right.
So anyway, there's so much to that, but yeah, so to tie it all together and to tie it back, how old were you roughly speaking when you did this kind of transformational fast, or I
I
don't
think
mean to
it,
call it that,
it
but like,
was, yeah, it was in my like towards the beginning of my Saturn return. So
oh
Saturn,
yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
you familiar with that phenomenon?
Yes, now that you mention that, I'm like, yes, I remember someone mentioning that when I was like, is it late 20s?
Yeah, it's like between 27 and 30. The phenomena is that Saturn, beyond astrology, just in terms of astronomically, it takes 365 point a quarter days for the Earth to rotate around the sun on this elliptical course. For Saturn, it takes about 28 years roughly. And so it's, like to me, there's some significance in anything that's happening in the natural ecosystem. And when I say ecosystem, I really mean the cosmic ecosystem, both what's happening right in front of us with like weeds and stuff that's growing right in front of us, but also like just what's happening in the celestial world, and being able to see how those may be a map for your, for your path, more so than like written information. Like I think the scripture for me is all in front of us. And
Mm.
if you really tap into that scripture that's in front of us, like for instance, John, you and I are having this conversation, and there's something very specific I believe I'm supposed to learn from this, and like there's a sign in it for me. And if I pay attention, that sign will maybe allow me to kind of come out of this loop, that closed network of narrative that I'm supposed to come out of. So kind of going back to the who am I narrative. And so for me, that's where the spirituality really comes into play, is just really being able to listen and observe the signs. And that could be true with the yoga sequence. So like, okay, hopping into headstand, and from there doing gundiasana, which is, two legs on the side, but don't bring those two legs, folding your body so you could bring those two legs over your elbow, but then instead of coming down, bringing them back up. So uh, there might be things that happen through nature. My observation of the willow tree, for instance, and the way the branches come down. So even when it's winter, you can identify it in a very easy way. But then how when the wind blows, there's ways in which it stays resilient, like it's able to come up like a skirt almost, but then
Mm.
come back down, right? So then if I'm paying attention, for me at least, then it's like, okay, how can I apply what the willow tree is doing into my yoga practice? And why did I come across the willow tree today when I'm taking this walk in February, to right before I'm like trying to, we're knowing there's this sequence I'm afraid of, but I want to go into it. And then I come across the willow tree and this is happening. So that's what I mean by
Mm.
saying.
Yeah, beautiful. At that, sometimes I think of it as like whether people have any sort of belief systems or not,
Right.
when you believe, like when people say everything happens for a reason,
Mm.
right? That's something, and again, that can almost feel like such a cliche. It's like for some people, they're like so on board. Other people, they're like, give me an effing break, and like anywhere in between. And but the bottom line is like it makes me think of what you're saying, because the way that you make an observation, and it's not even like it has to come from the books. Like you're saying, the scripture is in front of you at all times. If you like, your eyes are open, if the antenna are up, and you're paying attention, and the thing is, so like whether or not everything happens for a reason, if you perceive things that way,
Mm.
it to me, it does nothing but improve
Mm.
your relationship to yourself, to your environment, to everyone
Mm.
around you.
Mm.
So whether it's literally true or not, and because I just want to speak to all belief systems and honor whether people believe anything or not,
Mm.
to me, perceiving the world in the way you just laid it out,
Mhm.
whether it's literally true or not, I think it is true in the sense that no matter how you figure it, it improves your relationship to yourself and
Mm,
everything around you.
mm,
So,
right.
like, what is truth if not that?
Right. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Like just being observed. And I think what to me what you're speaking about is mindfulness. What's
Mm,
at the heart of mindfulness,
mhm.
and just being able to be that present where then you can apply that presence.
Yeah. So that happening around your late 20s to fast, did your asana, the postures, like going to yoga class and everything, did that start well before that, or when around what time
Yeah,
did
so
that?
I started take I went to yoga class studio like in my 20s, but I think my relationship to yoga was shaped by Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi, and also the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, and so three seminal books: the Bhagavad Gita, the complete one of the complete works of Rumi. My brother had given me that at 20. At 19, I came across. I read the Gita for the first time on my own, and then uh, I think around 24, 25, there was a woman who, I had come across who, just platonically, she would come visit me in the office in the space I was working in. I was working in like a pacifist organization, supporting peace. And so she would come by sometimes. She was from Japan. She was only here for like a couple of months. And she said there was something in this book that she believes is for me. So she gave me the autobiography of the yogi. And I think those books were seminal in my journey as well as the non-literature.
Mm,
But yeah, it did shift everything. It shifted, I became a vegetarian and then a vegan after this fast. Because when you don't eat for a while, at least for me, it's like, and like it's not something that's part of your practice, then it changes how when you actually have food in front of you, you can either just if you're in a situation which a lot of people in the world unfortunately are, where they're starved, and then they come across food, they're gonna like maybe have a voracious reaction to it. But because I was doing it deliberately, and when I first came across food at that conclusion of that, it was like, wait a minute, I have to take time to prepare this meal because this now I'm getting into things that are happening intrinsically independent of anything. Like this is sacred, right? So I have to, well, how can I prepare this food in a way that feels sacred? So then I prepare the meal. And then now it's in front of me and I'm like, oh, before I eat, like I was suddenly like, it was uh like this intervention that you hear God having in all the Abrahamic traditions when Moses is on the mountains and God is having a conversation with him, when when the prophet Muhammad is in the cave and the angel Gabriel comes to him and he tells him to recite, and he's telling him to recite, and Muhammad is illiterate, right? The prophet. And so now I'm being told, I'm here in front of this food and I'm like, I can't eat this without praying,
mhm.
because this food is so sacred and I'm starving and I haven't eaten in days, and I don't know how to like eat anymore. So then I start praying, just giving thanks, thinking about where this food is coming from. And then it connects me with that rumination, that line of thought connects me with the earth. And I was like, oh wow, we're on a sacred planet. Like it breeds life. And it bred the life of the water and the rock life and the plant life and everything that came together to make this specific food. And so now I'm really humbled by the earth, and I'm like, that, so that changed everything for me in many ways, the fast. And so the fasting is still a deep part of my practice. I fast pretty regular. I fast every full moon, but I also fast pretty regularly beyond that too.
Is there a period of time um that, and I'm not going to say the word recommend,
Mhm,
just because I don't want to put that kind of pressure. I mean, feel free to answer this in any way you would like to.
mhm.
But is there, because you mentioned 7 days, which is obviously pretty substantial, when you fast like your typical, let me just check in with my body kind of fast, like the full moon, for instance, how long typically is that?
Those are usually like one full 24 hours to 3 days.
Mm,
Because, there, if you, if you might know, and you might notice this, John, is like most of us start thinking the full moon is full, or we believe the full moon is full the day before and the day after. So the full moon is really has this appearance of full for 3 days. So there's something powerful about aligning with this reflective energy, because then the emptiness for me allows me to really reflect on this past lunar month
Mm.
and say like, hey, where did I come short of my higher self? How did I align with my intentions for my higher self this month? And then it gives me some clue into moving in. But I think 1 to 3 days could be really powerful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
'cause
about you? You have a fasting practice at all?
not a regular one, and
Yeah.
I'm always curious, like, I even think, like, maybe, on the New Year, I should do, 72 hours, right? Or,
Mhm.
um, for most of my life, starting unintentionally, because I have this thing that I've only realized as an adult, that a lot of my younger life, I was embarrassed to eat in front of people, which
Oh, interesting.
I'm not even sure. I should really continue to unpack that with a therapist, because I'm not exactly sure, and maybe even someone listening to this, or maybe you would know, but, like, so even I remember being in, like, elementary school at lunch, and, sometimes, like, all I would do is whatever my mom would pack, I would just get, like, because my mom is super sweet and supportive, she would, like, pack me lunches and just amazing, but a lot of times I would just, like, maybe have, like, a Ziploc bag of some dry Cheerios, and I would just sort of, like, eat a couple of
Mhm.
them, because,
Wow.
like, but then when I would get home from school, I would eat a lot, right? And
'Cause you were
so
hungry.
yeah, and I would just be by myself, or, like, with people I was
Wow.
comfortable with, I was okay. I wasn't like, I don't mean to lay it out as if it was some, like, super intense problem,
Right.
but it was enough to, like, in retrospect, be like, "Huh, that's interesting." Um, but anyway, all to suffice it to say that most of my life, I was intermittent fasting.
Deliberately or inadvertently?
Inadvertently, because I
Yeah.
think it just started with the school thing, where basically I wouldn't eat much, at least. I wouldn't eat much for breakfast or for lunch, and then it wasn't until, like, later towards dinner that I would eat a fair amount. And then as that continued on into my adult life, it's because I spent most of my adult life thus far, most of my time doing plays, like working in theater, for instance, where, you're at your peak at 8 p.m., and then so I would sleep usually till, say, I would do the show. I wouldn't go to bed till, I don't know, like 1 or something. And then I wouldn't wake up till like 9, and I wouldn't really eat anything till, I don't know, noon or whatever, maybe, sometimes later. And so I would end up inadvertently intermittent fasting, usually from the evening, like pretty deep into the next day,
Oh, well.
most days.
Yeah.
And so I never, what's great about it is, again, not being a scientist or recommending this for anybody, by the way, but what was great about it is, even to this day, I could eat or not eat, and not really, uh, it's like fine. Like, if there's food and it's time, I could eat a lot. But if I'm too busy doing something else, like, I don't really worry about it. Like, I could even go to jujitsu. I could do whatever I would run fasted. I would run a lot fasted,
Wow.
and I
Wow.
wouldn't really, if it was inconvenient to eat, I would just skip it. Which I'm not saying is good or bad. I don't really know,
How
but
does your body, mind, spirit feel on the fast?
I again, when it seems to be the right kind of time, because it asked me, on, like, different days would feel different.
I see.
But for the most part, it felt really calming and centering to know that eating was a choice, and not like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna fall over if I don't get this, cheeseburger stuffed down as quickly as possible. And I was actually, by the way, too, I was actually vegan for about 5 years in my 20s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then we should put a pin in that one for another time, because I would
Yeah, 'cause I
love to
might
dive
get
deep
into
on
on
that.
that, but yeah, sure.
And I would love to get more of your perspective on that too, because I, at a certain point, after about the first couple years, I felt amazing,
Mm.
and then after about year 3, I was struggling, and despite all the research I was doing and stuff, I couldn't quite figure it out, and then I think my best guess, here I go talking about it anyways, but I my best guess is I was kind of like overdosing on grains.
Oh.
Rather than, because again, there's like, when I
Right.
was just really, really hungry, especially from long runs, I'd be like, let me eat the biggest bowl of quinoa I can. And obviously that's good. It's good. Like, quinoa is good, but I think, just like relying way too much on heavy, heavy, heavy amounts of grains with not enough of just fruits, vegetables, good fats. Like, I think my diet was way too low fat. That'd be my guess in retrospect, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
I think a lot of people go into veganism with the right intention, hopefully, but, might not have the wherewithal to, like, really tap into it as a pattern of eating that could be really powerful and
Super
supportive.
Yeah, like, super sustain because, again, like, a couple years is pretty good,
Yeah, yeah,
but, like, it wasn't super sustainable in terms of
yeah,
lifelong.
right.
But, anyway, again, pin for another time. But last thing I'll say about it is the relationship with food. Similarly, when I am so grateful for that period of time, regardless, because it completely changed. Similar to what you were just saying before, spending that time vegan completely changed my
Mm,
relationship to food that has lasted to this day, that I say gratitude every single time I eat food.
that's right, that's right.
It completely changed it, because even when I started eating meat again, I remember my first time eating meat again, it
Mm,
wasn't because I was like, oh, I just want this. It
yeah.
was because I was like, I need to experiment here because my body's like really getting out of whack. And
Mm,
so I was like looking at, it was specifically a turkey burger, and I was like looking at this, and it was just no patty. I mean, it's just the patty. It was like no
mm,
things, and I was just looking at it, being like, I don't want to have to do this, but let me see what happens. And so I had spent so much time with it, like just looking at it, thinking about the turkey and like all these things. And so, regardless of meat or no meat, it changed my appreciation for everything I put into my body. And again,
mm.
to this day. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, something to that relationship to food that is at the heart of so many issues. And, it's a dialogue because there's the echo, like I was mentioning with that term loser, right? And it's like something about becoming a vegan allowed you to then change or, re-engage with that narrative of loser.
Mm.
Though, none of what you mentioned about being a vegan had anything to do with that term, but then your food relationship has so much to do with these voices, right? All of our food relationships.
Interesting. Can you say a little more about that?
Yeah, like so many people I've worked with in this ancient medicine, traditional medicine work, a lot of a common theme is just things like uh, eating in a way that, what you presence, like when you're around other people, you might have a Cheerio at a time, but then maybe when you're at home, you might eat a lot, right? And so just that thing of like, that the appearances that we have, and then like how we might actually engage with food as something comforting if you're living in, like many Americans are, in isolated situations, right? Where it's just like food becomes your anchor, so you're seeking comfort in it. And from an Ayurvedic perspective, that makes sense because it's kapha, it's the energy of earth. And so you're seeking earth because you're constantly in this airspace mindset of like racing thoughts and like I'm not enough and like why am I alone and I don't have anyone to hang out with. And so you're seeking to anchor. Or it might be the echoes, like you said, about being a loser and like a lot of that childhood drama playing out as an adult. And so now you're being chased and you're literally running away from in the mind with this thought and then physically running. Well, then what can anchor you is maybe food. So it's like, okay, maybe I'll just have a tub of ice cream tonight and that'll be my, and there's a reason why people call it comfort food, right? It's like, a lot of what's called comfort food is conducive to heart attacks.
Mm. Yeah, big time. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's super fascinating. I know. I would love when we I definitely want to pick up, because I want to touch on the writing, before
Yeah.
we finish today. And
Yeah.
then I want to pick up. I want to do this another time too, because I want to talk about getting into the herbalism, getting deeper into everything you're saying around food and all those other aspects.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. That
um,
sounds good because I only have a couple of minutes left. So yeah, whatever
yeah,
question.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah, so well, let's just spend this last bit about, because you teach obviously yoga at Kripalu. Do you teach other places as well?
Yeah. For a while, there sometimes people would bring me to their studios. So mostly right now it's people who will study yoga with me in
Mm.
what's called the Gurukul tradition, which is the guru student tradition. And then people who will yeah, besides that, right now, yeah, and then writing. And writing uh I've studied, I've taught all over, so yeah.
Yeah, so with
Sorry, that
writing,
was my daughter.
oh no, that's okay. That's totally fine. That's awesome. And I would love to talk more about being a father too, because
Yeah,
I don't know if that's something I'm doing in the future or not, but of course, like I selfishly, I'm just like, I'm so curious to talk about like living this spiritual path, how it affects your relationship to family and
yeah.
raising a daughter and all these things. So with the writing, how so is it mostly fiction? You mentioned poetry as well. So when you teach the workshops, what do you typically focus on in the workshops that you teach?
Yeah, yeah, I think for me, there's a healthy relationship between poetry, fiction, creative nonfiction. And so, for instance, Joan Didion is very central in my repository for creative nonfiction, and Tom Wolfe, another great writer. If you haven't read the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, brilliant piece of work on the '60s and the hippie culture. Great Americana. But my main medium is fiction in terms of typing. When I'm writing in my journal, it's mostly ruminations and I have three journals. One is ruminations, and that's just journaling, and another is a poetry journal. So then herein I'm like really tapping into like just the senses and the sensual and poets I love. There's some pretty amazing poets. A couple of favorite poets are, of course, Neruda, Garcia Lorca from Spain in the 30s and 40s, Adonis. Yeah. So anyway, there's June Jordan, who passed away. Some of the people I studied with, but then there's fiction, and fiction to me is just everything. Like that's what I do when I'm typing, and that's where everything merges. The third journal I didn't mention was my nature journaling. So I go out, I draw, and so I'll just sit with like a weed or a plant that day and just draw and see what poem it wants to share with me, or a message it wants to share with me.
Hmm.
But then all of it comes together in fiction, because as a fiction author, you're really tapping into the oneness, because there's just these characters that are coming out of you that you have very little to do with in some ways. If you're doing, because once you start typing and maybe you might start with maybe a notion or idea and you're typing. It's like this other character comes in, and then this other character comes in, and this one character wants to be really front and center. So then they become really front and center, and they all have stories, and some of them I don't like at all. Like I'm like, I just don't like you, but that character, I start learning about them and know, like, okay, like they had this issue with food when they were growing up. They were bulimic, but they were a male, and they were like especially afraid of talking about bulimia or whatever. So I think for me, fiction is a really potent, powerful, profound tool, because it allows you to re-engage with the narrative, because through connecting with these characters and these characters coming out of you, each one of these characters in many ways is a piece of you.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, if you're doing yoga right, and if you're in the Sufi tradition of nothingness, of zero, then that potential in the spectrum of the oneness, the diversity of being at once a Jesus-like figure and then being a murderer, all are possible.
That's similar to acting, by the way, in the
I
sense
can
that,
imagine.
yeah, because you're not, if you're acting,
Yeah,
like pretending,
yeah.
that's typically, like, just a short way of saying this. Typically, if you're pretending, that's not really good acting, typically, right?
Right.
And I don't mean,
Mm.
like, I don't mean to, again, that's such a long thing, so I'll say that for another time.
Uh-huh.
But the idea is, what you're doing is you're drawing on the aspects of you. Like, so if your character, for instance, is like, if there's this character and she's a mother and she's really sweet and she's loving and supportive, but then she gets in this situation where she ends up like you just mentioned murderer, so, like, not to be dark, but like killing a guy, right?
Right,
What you
right.
would do as the actor is say, okay, I'm this caring mother, but then I end up killing this guy. Under what circumstances, like,
Mm.
would I find myself capable of that? And even if it's not the same as the characters, you try as best you can to draw some sort of parallel. And
Right.
all suffice it to say, you're looking for the full spectrum of
That's right.
human experience as much as
That's
you can, to
that's
try
right.
to give life, because that's what makes a story powerful.
I love
So,
that. I love
yeah,
that.
I would
Yeah.
imagine in fiction writing, like, as these characters are popping up, and one other thing I want to ask around it, do you feel like, what are your feelings in terms of stories coming from you versus you being an antenna for stories to flow through you?
Yeah, yeah, I think, ultimately that's the hope, or the
Mm,
aspiration, is that there may be a story that you're witnessing because it weighs on your soul.
mm,
We're all witness to a world that feels a lot, in different ways. And so if you're someone like me, you might not talk a whole lot. I don't talk a whole lot. So then I'm typing, and then there's a lot that's coming out, right? And then it's like, this wants to be a story. And so then I think that's where the vessel element that you're, I think, alluding to comes in. Is like, okay, uh beyond me, there's something here that wants to be told and wants to be seen.
Mm.
wants to be explored. So I think, yeah, I think maybe it's that marriage of what you witness, what we experience, what's weighing on our soul,
Hmm.
and what wants to come out.
Great. Last thing I want to ask here before we go is there a particular exercise, maybe it's the sitting with the plant exercise, is there a particular exercise that you might recommend to someone for them to tap into their creative potential with writing, like a way to open a door, even for someone who thinks that they're not creative or that they're not a good writer or whatever it might be?
Yeah. Wait, what a great question. Yeah, I would say, maybe starting with this prompt, I remember when dot dot dot, right? And set aside a timer for 3 minutes and just, don't think too much, just write. Uh, and there's something about memory that, uh, could be really profound if it's, compounded with a song that you love. So if you're also then putting that "I remember when dot dot dot" as your prompt, putting aside 3 minutes and putting a song on that you love, that or you hate, or that maybe reminds you of a certain moment of
Mm.
life, seeing what happens, just allowing yourself to explore, not looking for or expecting something specific, but just allowing yourself to explore.
Mm.
I think that could be powerful and just really, all of this is a journey in self, and so it's an excavation process. Like to be fully ourselves is to really go deep in the archaeology of ourselves. So that could be powerful.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. I'm gonna do that myself. That sounds
Cool.
incredible. So before we go, are different workshops, different things you have coming up? Anything you'd like to share? Because I know I'm coming. I'm coming to one of your things too. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
workshops.
you could
Yeah.
just always look at the Kripalu board, and there's a retreat, yoga writing retreat that I'm doing in November, and I think there's workshops throughout the week that I do in yoga and writing and
Mhm.
poetry and that stuff. And then I do teach creative writing courses, yoga courses, and herbalism courses. Those I do virtually. So if you're interested in any of those, just my email is yogimedicineman@gmail. My website is yogimedicineman.com. My Instagram is Yogi Medicine Man. My Substack is Yogi Medicine Man. So
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much, and I'll include all that in the notes at the bottom too. So yeah, we've got so much more, and so I'll
I
definitely look
know.
forward to talking more and talking again on here. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
I'm just great to so grateful to spend more time with you and get to know you better and talk to you more. So
Yeah,
thank
same
you.
here. I want to be the one asking you more questions. So maybe let's be more of that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. I do deeply appreciate it, and yeah, so enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon. I'll see you very soon.
All right, brother. Blessings.
Thank you. You too. New episode every Wednesday. JonOrsini.com for upcoming events and more. Victory to the light within.